Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials Educational Podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with individual education plans, services under the Individuals with Disability Education Act, Section 504 services, English speakers of other languages, and interventions. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness to promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge. We all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. Edufaith, EDU, education, and faith, trusting or believing in one's ability. Edufaith would love for you to join our family, so subscribe at www.edufaithconsulting.com and make sure you subscribe to the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. I'm your host, Dr. Nakia. Thank you for joining me today. As always, sending you good vibes, love, peace, and happiness. New year, new norms. Reset, reboot, and refocus. Let's dive in with our January 1st, our first Edufaith inspirational story for the year. And it's titled Seed, Value, and Love, a Magical Night Where Everyone Shines. In the heart of Rexburg, Idaho, the community came together in a remarkable display of unity to host a special needs Christmas formal, skillfully organized by the Eastern Idaho Down Syndrome Family Connect. This fantastic event transformed a local venue into a dazzling winter wonderland where children and teens with special needs arrived in their most elegant attire, joyfully walking the red carpet and dancing the night away. With the incredible support of community volunteers, families, and organizers, every participant felt not only welcome but truly celebrated during this festive season. Attendees couldn't contain themselves with excitement for the lively music and dancing, embodying the event's joyful and inclusive atmosphere. The organizers emphasized the vital importance of crafting an experience where everyone can enjoy themselves without fear or judgment, ensuring that each individual's needs feel valued. And that is it for our Edufaith Inspirational Story. The link will be on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page and on the Edufaith Consulting website. And thank you, Rexburg, Idaho, for your community, for your unity, and allowing persons with disabilities to be seen, valued, and loved. This is a time, a magical time, and I'm sure those attendees will never forget this wonderful opportunity. So yay, answer the applause, and kudos to you for what you did. And that is it for our Edufaith Inspirational Story. Now let's dive into our dates to remember for the month of January. It is now 2026, a new year, new goals, I'm not going to say resolutions, but new year and time for a fresh start for everyone. For our month of January, we have National Mentoring Month, Thank You Month, which is perfect because you can thank everyone from December for all their gifts and well wishes and all the wonderful things that we did during the festive holiday season. January is also Shape Up Month. So if getting fit and getting in shape and being in better health is one of those things on your agenda, well, January is your time because it's Shape Up Month in the United States. January is also Glaucoma Awareness Month. And then the key dates of January 1st is New Year's Day. Happy New Year 2026. January 4th is World Braille Day in the United Nations. And then January 19th is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day, a day where we celebrate Dr. King and his accomplishments for civil rights for all, which is really a positive thing that we do on the podcast as well. What he did was try to fight for inclusion for all and civil rights for all. And that's what we want to continue to live on through Dr. King's dreams and make sure that we provide that inclusive environment for persons of all colors, all races, all nationalities, and all disabilities. And that is it for our dates to remember for the month of January. Those dates will be on the Edufaith Consulting website. Now it's time for breaking news. Once again, Happy New Year, and let's dive into the breaking news stories that came from December 2025. For January, breaking news. The first story is dated December 2nd, 2025, and it is titled 50 Years of IDEA, 4 Things to Know About Landmark Special Education Law. And this article came from Education Week. Education Week commemorated the 50th anniversary of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, a cornerstone law ensuring that students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education. The article reviewed IDEA's historic context, tracing its evolution from the Education for All Handicap Act of 1975 to today's robust framework supporting millions of students. The piece detailed 4 critical obligations for schools: providing individual education programs, IEPs, ensuring procedural safeguards, promoting inclusion and maintaining compliance with federal standards, and other information regarding IDEA. Experts interview emphasized that while IDEA has transformed education, challenges remain in funding, staffing, and equitable implementation across districts. And that source was from Education Week. And also, I wanted to point out that I talk about this in my book. Chapter 2 of all of my books are aligned with the history of education and the history of IDEA. So not only could you look at this Education Week article, you can also pick up any of my books as I dive into the historical context of IDEA and Section 504 in Chapter 2. The next story is dated December 10, 2025. Inside one state's bold plan to keep special education teachers. I love this story. Pennsylvania launched a statewide initiative to combat a severe shortage of special education teachers. The program includes mentorship for new educators, financial incentives, and ongoing professional development to improve retention rates. Officials argue that stabilizing the workforce is essential for maintaining consistent services for students with disabilities. The article highlighted testimonials from teachers who benefited from the program and data showing early signs of success. Education leaders hope that this model will inspire similar efforts nationwide, as teacher shortages remain a critical barrier to fulfilling IDEA's mandate. And that story also came from Education Week. The next story is December 16, 2025. One lawyer helped reshape special education law at the Supreme Court. Bloomberg's law feature on Roman Martinez explored his pivotal role in Supreme Court cases that clarified schools' obligations under IDEA. These rulings strengthen protections for students with disabilities, ensuring that educational programs meet individualized needs and uphold federal standards. The documentary underscores how legal advocacy shapes policy and impacts millions of families. Martinez's works continue to influence interpretations of disability rights, enforcing the importance of litigation and advancing educational equity. And this story also came from Education Week, and this will be a great story to go and watch and learn about this documentary. The next story is December 18, 2025, how the Department of Education cuts could hurt resources for students with disabilities. Pbis News examined the implications of proposed downsizing within the Department of Education, warning that the reductions in staff and funding could undermine programs supporting students with disabilities. The report noted that oversight of IDEA compliance might weaken, leaving vulnerable students without essential services. Advocates interviewed stressed that these cuts could exacerbate inequities, particularly in underfunded districts. The segment called for sustained investment and federal leadership to protect the rights guaranteed under IDEA and Section 504. The next story is dated December 21st, 2025. Supreme Court case raises alarm for disability rights advocates. A pending Supreme Court decision on IQ testing and death penalty has sparked concern among disability rights advocates. The ruling could redefine intellectual disability standards, potentially influencing eligibility for special education and related services. Advocates emphasize the need for consistent definitions to safeguard rights across the legal and educational context. The case illustrates the intersection of criminal justice and disability policy, raising questions about broader implications for civil rights. And that story came from USA Today. Next story is December 22nd, 2025, Inside McMahon's Plans for Special Education. This is a big story, so listen up. Politico reported on a meeting between disability advocates and Education Secretary Linda McMahon, where proposals to transfer federal special education responsibilities outside the Department of Education were discussed. Such changes could significantly alter enforcement of IDEA and Section 504. Advocates are still worried about the potential fallout from transferring special education programs to federal agencies such as the Department of Labor and Health and Human Services. While no decisions have been finalized, the decision signals potential structural shifts that may impact oversight and funding for special education programs nationwide. Advocates are closely monitoring developments to ensure protections remain intact. A department spokesman said McMahon really appreciated the dialogue and openness and absolutely wants to continue hearing from the people that know these programs best and students who are served by these programs. The next story is December 14th and December 15th, 2025. Disability rights lawyers threatened by cuts and reassignments. Reports indicate that proposed budget cuts and lawyer reassignments under the Trump administration could severely limit access to legal advocacy for individuals with disabilities. These changes may weaken enforcement of civil rights protections in education and beyond. Advocates are urging policymakers to maintain funding and staffing levels to ensure continued support for those reliant on legal assistance to safeguard their rights. The next story is December 22nd, 2025, and this is our final Essential News story. And this story is all about challenges in childcare for children or kids with disabilities. Pbis highlighted the difficulties parents face in securing childcare for children with disabilities. The segment explored systematic gaps in support and the urgent need for inclusive childcare policies to promote equity. Experts argue that addressing these gaps is critical for enabling parents and policymakers to work in the workforce. The story calls for collaborative solutions involving policymakers, providers, and advocacy groups. And this was actually a great segment. I watched it this morning. Really, really good. And that is it for our Essential News. All of those links will be on the Edufaith Consulting website under the announcements page. And let's go ahead and shift to our Essential Knowledge. Today for Essential Knowledge, we're going to have a new, fresh start. So it's a new year. We're going to have new norms. And one thing I've been wanting to talk about and discuss is behavior. We started the whole semester, and this whole season 4 has been positive school culture, how you can use your school psychologist, how we can have that inclusive education environment, positive schools climate, and all things to help promote equity and access for all students. And what I want to do today is focus on behavior for this episode. Managing behavior and seeing how behavior impacts the classroom, impacts children at home, impacts leadership. Everything is on behavior and how students behave. And when students are in discipline practice and positive behavior supports and supports are equitable for students, and teachers are intervening and parents are intervening, and it's that whole climate and culture of inclusiveness and collaborativeness, students really do achieve. Behavior also can negatively impact the classroom environment as well. So behavior can be positive or negative. And what I want to do today is discuss positive behavior supports and give us an introduction on behavior as we have a new year, new norms, starting the classroom off, how we want to have goals and things aligned for us to be successful. So we're going to reset, reboot, and refocus and talk about behavior. A lot of the context that I'm taking for today's podcast is coming from my Essential Tips for Educators book. And in that book on page 102, I discuss behavior supports and behaviors and how they're so impactful for teachers. I also discuss it in the parent book and the Ed Leadership book as well, the Special Education Leaders book. Today, I'm going to pull the excerpt and I'm going to highlight that chapter, which starts on page 102, which talks about behaviors and other components and how behavior aligns with teaching and everything. So without further ado, let me go ahead and read what I have from those chapters, and then we'll discuss in context behavior supports. Managing students' behavior is a significant component of effective class teaching and instruction. In chapter 1, I mentioned how behaviors impacted my first day experience. Throughout my first year, I struggled and spent time trying to find strategies to address behaviors. I didn't want to complain to my principal, therefore I internalized my struggle and relied on trial and error processes until I landed on something that worked, even if it was temporary. Over time, I developed successful systems aligned with my teaching practices, students' behaviors, and needs. And that was just an introduction of what I faced when I was a teacher as far as behaviors and trying to manage behavior as a first-year teacher. So let's go ahead and dive into the history of positive behavior support. Teachers report that student behavior is their biggest struggle. Both general and special education teachers also report a lack of sufficient training to address aggression, defiance, and violence they witness daily. Teachers also report seeing an increase in children's behaviors at younger ages, and that came from the discipline problem from 1996. Time, lack of professional development, and high student-teacher ratios can also affect behavior management. All students are different, and appropriate behavior processes take time and teaching. Educators must teach and reinforce behaviors as part of their best practices for teaching. Some students walk in with perfect behavior, but for those who do not, your role as an educator is to teach appropriate behavior and set the tone of respect and expectations. I hope this section will address foundational information on behavior and provide resources to support positive behavior management as an educator. Let's first dive into the history of positive behavior supports in school. And I'm going to use positive behavior supports or positive behavior intervention supports. Positive behavior supports, later widely known as positive behavior intervention supports, emerged as a response to ineffective exclusionary discipline practice and the need for proactive research-based approaches for student behavior. The origin started from the 1980s, from behavior disorders to prevention. Researchers in the 1980s identified a major gap. Schools lacked effective, ethical, and research-based behavior interventions for students with behavior disorder. This led to applied demonstrations and research studies at the University of Oregon showing that punishment-heavy approaches were ineffective. A shift toward prevention and database decision-making was core. An emphasis on school-wide systems rather than isolated interventions was effective, along with explicit social skills instruction, and that being a foundational practice. This decade laid the groundwork for Pbis, or positive behavior supports, which later became positive behavior interventions. In the 1990s, federal recognition and the birth of the Pbis was pushed out, and this came along with response to intervention. And so with the reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Act in 1997, that mandated the creation of the National Center on Positive Behavior Interventions and Support. Key developments with that include National Pbis Center, established by the University of Oregon's partnership across universities, focus on evidence-based practices and technical assistance to schools, and a shift from individual interventions to school-wide frameworks. This decade formalized Pbis as a national movement. By the 2000s, Pbis had evolved into a multi-tiered system of support for behavior, emphasizing prevention, data, and consistent school-wide expectations. Giving you a little context on that, school-wide Pbis became the dominant model. Over 16,000 schools received direct professional development and technical assistance from the Pbis Center. Integration of academic systems strengthened the link between behavior and learning, and Pbis became a national standard for improving school climate and reducing exclusionary discipline. When we look at the conceptual foundations, the values and the behavioral science behind it, Dunlap, Horner, Saylor, Sugai, and colleagues describe Pbis as rooted in quality of life and student choice as core values, behavior science as the technology behind the approach, organizes supports across the environment, physical, social, educational, biomedical, and reduce problem behaviors, and increase meaningful participation. This value plus science combination is what distinguishes Pbis from traditional behavior management. And when we think about today and how we look at Pbis today, it's widely used across the United States. It is tiered, it's proactive, it is an instructional approach to behavior. Modern Pbis emphasizes teaching and reinforcing expectations rather than punishing misbehavior. Tiered supports for all students, data-driven decision-making, positive school climate as a driver of academic success. And if we want to look at the key quick summary of how it looks overall, I have this chart if you're looking at the visual. So we have the 1980s, the 1990s, 2000s, and how it looks today. There's a visual on the slide if you're watching this on YouTube. Now, all of this came from Dunlap, Saylor, Horner, and Sugai, 2009. And this was the overview and history of positive behavior support. And I quote this a lot in my book as well. Positive behavior support is a comprehensive, research-based, proactive approach that promotes positive change for students with challenging behaviors. It involves identifying the purpose of problematic, teaching appropriate alternative responses that serve the same purpose as the complex behavior, consistently rewarding positive behaviors, minimizing the rewards for complex behaviors, and then minimizing psychological, environmental, and curricular elements that trigger problematic behaviors. Pbis aims to reduce challenge behavior through multiple methods, changing systems, altering environments, teaching skills, and appreciating positive behaviors. Pbis seeks to understand the purpose of the behavior so that the student can replace old behaviors with new pro-social behaviors that achieve the same purpose. Implementation of Pbis offers 3 benefits for educators. The first is suppressing a behavior through punishment is counteractive, and it may have short-term effects on behavior reduction. The second is knowing the why. Knowing the why of behavior gives teachers a more appropriate response to serve long-term interests. And 3, Pbis works, and it works well. Based on research of 109 published studies of individuals with disabilities and severely challenged behaviors conducted between 1985 and 1996, Carr and his colleagues in 1997 documented the success of Pbis in reducing the incidence of problematic behavior. Pbis is often a school-wide initiative in schools across the nation. However, if it is not something that's been or happening in your school, I would encourage you to develop some classroom procedures within your classroom to reinforce positive behavior supports or behavior supports in your classroom. Pbis, I'm going to say these two synonymously, involves the 4 main steps: identifying the challenging behavior, the why, and why is this behavior occurring? Is this avoidance, etc. Number 2, teaching appropriate alternative responses that serve as the same purpose of the challenging behavior. 3, consistently rewarding positive behaviors and minimizing rewards for challenging behaviors. And then 4, minimizing the physiological, environmental, and curricular factors that trigger the challenging behaviors. I'm repeating this because I want to reiterate the 4 main steps once again. When we're thinking about some proactive strategies in the book and in my book, I discuss some strategies for teachers, and I'll come back to those a little bit later. But when you're looking at positive behavior supports, I'm mentioning it educators because I'm reading from the educator book, but I also want to align that this can go along with parents and school leaders as you look at ways to implement positive behavior supports at home or system-wide in your school building if you're educational leader. So let's discuss how positive behavior supports align with students with disabilities. Let's go through that and discuss that. So Pbis was designed to support students with disabilities. Its core feature is prevention, explicit instruction, database decision-making, and tiered supports. And these directly reinforce the legal requirements of IDEA in Section 504. It aligns strongly with disability law because it reduces exclusionary discipline, which disproportionately affects students with disabilities. Pbis emphasizes instructional and individualized supports, mirroring IDEA's requirement for specially designed instruction. Pbis use functional behavior assessments and behavior intervention plans, which IDEA explicitly requires when behavior impedes learning. Pbis ensures access to the general curriculum, which is a core component of both IDEA and Section 504. And then Pbis promotes non-discrimination, aligning with Section 504's civil rights protections. Pbis is essentially a behavior systems framework that helps schools meet the legal obligations. And when we look at how they align and how they work together, if you're looking at the video, I have an alignment chart on the page, but I'm going to read it to you as well. So alignment. The alignment area, first is access to faith, and then Pbis contribution, it teaches expectations and reduces barriers. When we look at the IDEA and Section 504 framework, both laws require that free and appropriate public education. When we look at the alignment area of behavior supports, Pbis contribution is that it provides those tiered interventions, behavior intervention plans, and functional behavior assessments. When we look at the law requirement, IDEA requires behavior interventions and functional behavior assessments when behavior impedes learning. When we're looking at alignment area for equity and non-discrimination, Pbis contributes by reducing disproportionality. And under IDEA and Section 504, the requirement, Section 504 prohibits discrimination based on a disability. So when you think about reduces disproportionality, what I mean is that students with disabilities are suspended or punished at a higher rate than students who are non-disabled. So when you look at disproportionality, when you have students that are with disabilities who are being suspended or expelled more than a student without a disability, that is disproportionality. All right, let's go back to our chart. We're looking at alignment area of PBIS, IDEA, and Section 504, and we look at an individualization. The PBIS contribution is that provides those Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. Under IDEA, it requires that individualized instruction that is in an IEP or a combination that's in a 504 plan. And then the final alignment is database decisions. When you think about PBIS, that's where you progress monitor that data. And under IDEA and Section 504, both laws require data-driven decisions. PBIS is a practical framework that helps schools meet their legal mandates of Section 504 and IDEA by having that disproportionality, the Tier 2 and 3 supports, progress monitoring, the tiers, and aligning with FAPE and Section 504. One thing that I mentioned was behavioral intervention plans. And you might be asking, what's a behavior intervention plan? Well, and I'm reading straight from my book, a behavior support plan defines how an environment will change and help students reduce problem behaviors and improve pro-social behaviors and become more successful within school. And that's from Shagai Horner et al. 2000. The behavior plan defines what the school will do differently and outline ways to assess strategies' effectiveness. Behavior plans provide documentation of professional accountability and consistency for a team. A group of individuals who know the student will develop a behavior support plan, and the overall goal is to support the child and foster change in the behavior patterns. The team will also or sometimes include teachers, administrators, specialists, family members, and in other cases, the students. It depends on how old the student is. And the information that is needed to guide the development of the behavior support plan is collected through a functional behavior assessment. And I'm going to explain what that is in just a minute. Together, the functional behavior assessment and the behavior support plan assist the team in A, demonstrating an understanding of the problem, B, redesigning the environment, and C, organizing for success. Now let's shift to functional behavior assessments, and we'll tie this all into and provide some tips for parents. I mentioned behavior support plans, and those come from the functional behavior assessments. So here's what a functional behavior assessment. Functional behavior assessments are efficient processes for understanding problem and behavior and factors contributing to the occurrence and maintenance. Information collected during a FBA is the basis for developing individualized and comprehensive behavior intervention plans. The FBA process is a problem-solving strategy consisting of problem identification, information collection and analysis, intervention planning, monitoring, and then evaluation. A significant outcome of FBA process or of the FBA process is a summary or hypothesis statement that describes the behaviors and the factors believed to be associated with the occurrence and non-occurrence of the problem behaviors. For instance, student is misbehaving in school during fourth period math. Could this be work avoidance? So the team will come up with a hypothesis of why. Is the student overstimulated? What is going on, and try to assess the times that these issues occur and analyze that behavior data to come up with some interventions. The primary purpose for completing an FBA is to enhance a behavior intervention plan and to enhance the effectiveness, the efficiency, and the relevance. This information is collected and summarized, and then the team will meet and they'll have a basis for selecting specific and individualized strategies and support for a student. So the FBA is defined on major components, which is first, identifying the problem behavior, then B, triggering antecedents or events that predict when the behavior is likely to occur, C, increase the likelihood of the behavior happening in the future, and then D, setting possibilities or factors that worsen the problem behavior. So when you think of those four things, you want to identify the problem. Why is the problem happening? Is the problem happening at the same time every day? What is happening before that? Is this work avoidance? Is this student hungry? What's going on? Why are these behaviors happening? And then what's the likelihood that it's going to happen again in the future? Is it probably going to happen again at 2 o'clock every day? Is the student's medicine wearing off? It identifies the context and the why. And then it sets some possibilities of factors that worsen the problem behavior. So Does the problem behavior get worse as time goes on? Is a student becoming hungry? Is a student frustrated because they don't understand the reading assignment? So you're looking at the why and the consistency of the behavior, and you're assessing everything. When we look at the outcomes of the FBA, the outcomes include a summary statement, including the problem behavior, triggering antecedents, consequences, and event settings, data to confirm the accurateness of a summary statement, a competing pathway summation, behavior support or intervention plan approaches, and ways to implement the plan that specifies what, when, who, how, who's going to do what to help support those behaviors. And then at the end, there's a proposal to assess the effectiveness and implementation of the behavior intervention plan, which means the team doesn't just write the plan and go away. You come back to the plan. You come back and reassess how things are going, how things are working, and if you need to make any changes. So that is a summary of a functional behavior assessment and how functional behavior assessments analyze the data, and that analysis of data aligns and goes into the positive behavior intervention plan or behavior support plan, and how that all aligns with individualized support data, progress monitoring for students with disabilities or students who don't have disabilities. It's not just a special education thing. Positive behavior supports can be provided for any student, whether they receive services under Section 504 or services under IDEA. It can be part of the multi-tier system of support and analyzing behaviors and the why. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that you can use some of this as we look into the new year of how we can help support and revise behaviors. So here are some strategies and some tips for parents, teachers, and leaders. And then I'm going to go back because, once again, this came from my Essential Tips for Educators book. So I have a lot of strategies in here for the teachers. But for my parents, I want to leave you with 4 tips. Create predictable routines at home. Consistent schedules help students feel secure and reduce behavior challenges. I know a lot of times you're out on Christmas break and you're getting ready to go back to school, and that's another change in patterns and change in procedures. You may want to prepare your child for getting ready to go back to school and getting up early and things like that. So try to have those predictable routines and conversations at home so there's not an outlash of behavior because of the change in schedule. You want to use positive reinforcement and provide positive praise. Make sure you let your child know how much you love that they started their homework right away. You love the way they got up without having an attitude in the morning. You love the way they did something that is different and that's specific that you enjoy. So parents, provide praise at home. It's not only something that happens at school. Provide the praise at home. You want to communicate regularly with teachers and share concerns and collaborate on strategies that support your model. As I mentioned when I talked about positive behavior supports and planning, parents, you're a part of the functional behavior assessment process. You're a part of the MTSS process, and you'll also be a part of that behavior support plan process. So you are a partner. So make sure that you're communicating what you're seeing at home, and you all can collaborate together at school and home to have that oneness for your child across the board. The last strategy for parent is model emotional regulation. Children learn calm behavior by watching adults manage stress in healthy ways. We are all stressed, things happen. And I think it's really good that we're transparent with our children to know, okay, this didn't go as planned, but this is how mommy's going to handle it. But this is how dad's going to handle it. You are your child's first teacher. So modeling behaviors, emotional regulation is really going far, and children are watching what you're doing. So those are my 4 tips for parents. Create predictable routines at home, use positive reinforcement, communicate with your teachers, and model emotional regulation, first teachers. All right, for my teachers, speaking of teachers, let's talk about some things that you can do. Teach expectations explicitly. Don't assume students just know. As a teacher, you have to model, practice, and reinforce. Model, practice, and reinforce. I feel like January is a great time for you to reintroduce the rules. I used to always reintroduce the rules in January, and then I will model and reinforce in January so you can carry that out for the rest of the semester. So don't assume students remember everything. Have your rules and consequences posted, and then explicitly reteach everything. Remember, this is how we came into the classroom. I know we did this last semester, but I want to make sure that we are firm on our procedures and processes in the classroom. The next thing, teacher, is to use data to guide interventions. So track patterns to identify triggers and adjust supports. Pay attention to students. When students are misbehaving, Try to figure out the why. And remember, you can get your school psychologist involved. You can get your MTSS team involved. But when things are happening over and over and over, see if you can identify the pattern. Is it coming from a source of frustration? Is the child frustrated? Is this only happening in math? Is this only happening in lunch when the time is unstructured? So use your data as a teacher and your professional expertise to guide interventions. And then when you need to get the team involved, get the team involved and solicit that help of your psychologists, your special education teachers, etc. Then the next thing you want to do, teacher, is build strong relationships. My largest chapter in all my books is relationships. Relationships with your leader, teacher, etc. Connection is the foundation of behavior support and academic engagement. Throughout all my years, relationships matter, and especially with students. So you want to have those foundations, you want to have those behavior supports, you want to also promote the academic engagement. So build your strong relationships with all of your students, get to know your students. And then finally, not only have the relationship with your students, but collaborate with families. So you want to build your relationship with families, but you also want to collaborate with families. So you want to share strategies across home and school to create consistency for students. Keep those strategies all aligned and work together to communicate and try to get the parents involved. Try to get the parents as your advocate to help support you with what you're doing in school. And remember, there's a village, as I mentioned before, of a MTSS team or teams at your school that can help support you with behaviors as well. For my teachers, I'm going to go into a few more extra things that I discussed in the book that started on in the chapter. So some of those proactive strategies for teachers, I'm going to give you a few more. Alter the classroom environment. Make sure that you have defined spaces. Alter high traffic distraction areas. Make necessary room arrangements. So look at your classroom physically. Is it appealing? Is it overstimulating? Is it clear? Look at your environmental conditions. Do you have a high traffic area? So every time somebody walks by, that student is going to say something to them. So look at your physical environment. The next thing, teachers, increase predictability and scheduling. Make sure that you try to keep a schedule that is consistent every day. And then when changes do occur, give your students a heads up, or try to give them a heads up. For instance, I know fire drills you can't control, but make sure that you practice how to react to fire drills where there's lesson behaviors and lesson anxiety, because they know, okay, we can't predict when this is going to happen, but when it happens, this is the process. So make sure that you have those processes for drills and for unforeseen circumstances. Have your schedules and your routines posted. Have action plans and have procedures for everything. Going to the library, etc. You want to increase choice making. Give students with challenging behaviors opportunities to make some choices, and give them two choices. You can do this or that. It's not giving up power, but it's sharing that power with students, and that makes a difference sometimes. Empowering students to make choices, that helps teachers lessen and help students with their feeling of powerlessness. You want them to feel like they are in control of the classroom, and it is not really a partnership, but you want them to know and take some ownership of their learning. You want to make sure that you're looking at your curriculum and making curriculum adaptations. I mentioned sometimes students avoid work because it's difficult. So look at your curriculum and look at what's going on during reading time and things like that. So maybe you need to lower the pace on something. Maybe you need to adjust the time along the way. Maybe you need to allow a break in between an instructional strategy. That's something that you can do. So look at your curriculum and how you can adjust your curriculum, not the content per se, but maybe the structure of how you delivering your instruction, taking breaks, differentiated groups, making daily changes, looking at, okay, I'm losing their interest. Let me switch to do something else. Maybe I need to try something hands-on. And then when students do well, you want to appreciate the positive behaviors. Just like parents going to reinforce the positive behaviors, as teachers, you're going to do that too. You want to provide praise and rewards. And you don't have to reward for everything, but you want to use words of encouragement, appreciation, high fives, physical expressions, things like that to help students feel welcome and to help them feel that, oh, my teacher is appreciating me. This praise is positive, because most students want praise and they appreciate praise. That really does make a difference. So let me read a little excerpt from the book about rewards and positive reinforcement. Research suggests instant and frequent rewards for the desired behavior when providing rewards. But over time, you want to be careful, because when you reward over and over, Alberto and Troutman, 1990, have pointed out that the more you reward someone for a task, sometimes they may lose interest. So you want to make sure that you're not using rewards as a form of control, but the goal is to boost behavior and boost that to be a skill over time. So you want to make sure when you are providing rewards, not praise, rewards, that you're keeping it interesting, that it's something that the students are into, and that you recognize and the students recognize, you recognize the students' good intention as their teacher, and that you believe that they can learn and grow. When I was a teacher, I had rewards in my classroom. I also provided praise, but I had rewards. And one thing I would reward students, I had a candy jar. I would have bear books. We had money that was little bears. I made little paper money. I had tickets. I would do auctions, go to Dollar Tree and have little auctions. We would do like little fun Fridays where we would walk the track. So those are things that I did and had celebrations and rewards, but I did not use it as a tool or form of control. I used it in moderation, but I also provided praise. So you don't want to over reward, but you do want to balance it out and then find out what the students like and what they're interested in and provide those rewards that align with their interests. Because if you're giving them something that maybe is kindergarten level and middle schoolers, it's not going to matter. So asking them, what do you like? Okay, I like Takis. All right. So maybe have going to Sam's and having some Takis or some things that you can auction off on Fridays to help balance out the rewards. So having those class celebrations, stickers, treasure chests, things like that, that's based on the student's interest and level. And then the final thing for my teachers is teach replacement skills. So once a student does something, instead of this, let's do this. So teach a replacement skill. And this kind of goes with social skills and alternative responses, but you can reduce the incidence of problematic behavior and increase the skill level of the students by teaching it. So that was not a good idea, Johnny. However, this is what you could do, or talking to the student, how could you have handled this differently? And if this happens again, teaching that social skill for that student. So I know I gave my teachers a lot, but I'm going to recap. So teach expectations explicitly, use data to guide interventions, build strong relationships, collaborate with families. And then from the book, alter the classroom environment, increase predictability and scheduling, make curriculum adaptations, increase choice making, appreciate positive behaviors, provide some type of reward and incentives, but don't over reward, and then teaching those replacement skills for students that will help you a lot. So think about those things as you journey into the new year, my teachers. Finally, for my school leaders, the best thing I can say is try to establish a school-wide Pbis framework. It really does work. Ensure consistent expectations, language, and reinforcement across all settings. So whatever your teachers are doing, try to build upon that. Build a Pbis team and have your teachers involved and make this something system-wide, school-wide, where it's mirrored everywhere, where everyone has the same expectations, whether they go to the cafeteria, the library, or in the teacher's classroom. You also want to provide ongoing professional learning. As I mentioned at the beginning of the chapter, a lot of teachers feel that they don't have enough training in de-escalation and culturally responsive practices and working with behavior. So teachers need training in Pbis and behavior interventions. So see what you can do as far as providing some type of professional development. It's the first of the year leaders. So look at how you can hone in on professional development if it's something that you do for January or something that you do at the end of the year or the beginning of next year. Look at ways you can have professional development that supports teachers with behaviors in the classroom. Then also use discipline data to address inequities. We are all looking at data. We're looking at at-risk data, intervention data. Monitor disproportionality and intervene early. See how many students with disabilities are being suspended or expelled. And then what can you do as a leader to help support this? Address the inequities. Look at your data and use your data in your school climate to address and come up with a plan. And then finally, you want to engage families and community partners. Inclusive leadership strengthens trust and improved outcomes. So not only do you want to get your teachers involved, you want to get your parents and the communities involved. Send out surveys and use the survey data to build those teams, those collaborative teams of parents, leaders, and teachers to come together to work out ways to implement that positive behavior support and have activities that align with that school-wide. So to recap my leaders, we have establish a school-wide framework, provide ongoing professional development, use discipline data to address inequities, and engage families and community partners. Another thing I want to add for teachers with professional development, you may even have district personnel who can do behavior supports for the school. So look into your district resources, or you might hire a consultant like me, hey, but look into your district resources because a lot of times those district level personnel could come in and provide trainings and information, including your school psychologist. And that wraps up podcast content and essential knowledge today of new year, new norms, reset, reboot, and refocus as we look at behaviors and how to support positive behavior supports, positive behavior interventions, the history, tips for leaders, teachers, and parents, and how it helps support students with disabilities. A lot of what I read today came from my Essential Tips for Educators book, which is available on Amazon. I'm not going to read a book excerpt for today because the whole podcast was a book excerpt. And I started on page 102. I touch on this in all of the books, but for that book, particularly the purple one, we started off on page 102, and I focused on my journey as a teacher and what I dealt with as far as dealing with behaviors and how teachers can support behaviors throughout the year. So maybe you want to give that book, Essential Tips for Educators, to a teacher, or my leaders, you maybe want to buy some for your teachers as you start the new year and start with page 102 and gain that knowledge and information and share the podcast. And finally, let's go ahead and dive into our quote for today as we close out. And as we think about changes in 2026 and what we're going to do different, because I am not going to push resolutions, I'm going to push goals. When you think about new things and new focus, new behaviors, remember this: the only person you should try to be better than is the person you were yesterday. So look at who you were in 2025 and see how you want to be better in 2026. And that quote is our word of wisdom, and that is from Author Unknown. Thank you. I want to encourage you to get essential and explore resources that truly support your journey in education, parenthood, and leadership. I've written a variety of books specifically designed for leaders, educators, parents, and Section 504 coordinators. Each one created to inspire action, build capacity, and strengthen impact. All of my books are available on Amazon and the Edufaith Consulting website. Be sure to follow me on Amazon under Dr. Nakia Simmons Cotton to stay updated on new releases and empowering content created just for you. We have essential tips for special education leaders, essential tips for educators, essential tips for Section 504 coordinators, and essential tips for parents. Now it's time to share. I enjoy connecting with listeners, offering advice and answering questions, and sharing inspirational stories. I want to use this platform to share and care. Essential advice is your turn to ask for advice or share good news. The letters will remain anonymous and the stories will be featured on the podcast. Sharing is caring. Please email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH, the number 4ALL@gmail.com. All listeners should adhere to district policies, follow protocols, remain ethical, and adhere to guidelines in the best interest of children. Edufaith Essentials does not assume responsibility or is legally liable for anyone's actions based on the information in this podcast. Before I go, I want to invite you to subscribe to www.edufaithconsulting.com to stay connected and informed. When you subscribe, you'll receive a monthly newsletter packed with fresh resources, leadership tips, and an insightful blog to support your growth as an educator, leader, or parent. www.edufaithconsulting.com. Scroll down, enter your email address, and click subscribe. Don't forget to check out and subscribe to the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, where you'll find practical videos, interviews, and essential strategies designed to empower your work and purpose. Let's grow together, stay connected, and stay equipped. Get essential. At Edufaith Educational Services, we are committed to equipping families, educators, and leaders with tools, training, and support they need to thrive in today's educational landscape. In addition to our podcast, we provide a wide variety of educational services designed to address the needs of parents, support with disability services, meeting advocacy, service explanations, educators, guidance, coaching, professional development, and leaders, training, professional coaching, leadership coaching, and support with diverse learners and programs. We also specialize in college and accommodation advocacy, including SAT and ACT accommodation support, college and career readiness coaching, and parent education training for schools, organizations, and community groups. Our expertise extends to program development and review, including Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504, and inclusive practice frameworks. We offer customized professional development for schools, districts, nonprofits, and businesses focused on supporting diverse learners and inclusive education. Edufaith is also proud to offer trainings based on our impactful Essential Tips book series, including Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders, Essential Tips for for Section 504 coordinators, and essential tips for parents and educators. These sessions provide practical strategies, compliance guidance, and leadership insight grounded in real work experience and aligned with current educational policies. Go to www.edufaithconsulting.com to see what Edufaith can do to support you. Don't forget to follow Edufaith on social media to stay connected, inspired, and informed. Join us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, TikTok, and other social media platforms for daily tips, encouragement, upcoming events, and behind-the-scenes updates. Whether you're a parent, educator, or leader, our social media platforms offer valuable content, community engagement, and practical strategies to support your journey. Stay in the know and be a part of the movement. Follow Edufaith today. As we close out, I want to thank you for listening to today's episode, and thank you for staying connected to the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Don't miss a moment to listen to the Edufaith Essentials podcast on your favorite platforms, including Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all other podcast platforms, including Buzzsprout. All links to the podcast and information is easily accessible on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page. Tune in, subscribe, and join us as we inspire and equip you every step of the way. Dr. Nakia here signing off, reminding you to be the light, be the change, love someone. Let's restore faith in education one student at a time, and let's get essential.